Pecoraro. Welcome to Flute Unscripted. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
We are really excited for your upcoming performance here virtually through Flute Center. And I wanted to talk with you more and learn about your career here in New York City. Let's start at the beginning. You got your bachelor's from Ithaca and your master's at Boston Conservatory. And I want to hear all about this grueling degree that you got there. You were a multiple woodwind performance major. So that was flute, clarinet, and saxophone, and preparing auditions on all three and then recitals. What was that process like?
It was so much fun, but it was like crazy. It was absolutely insane. Yeah, I had to for that degree. That degree exists in a handful of schools across the country, and they all run kind of similarly. In Boston, I had to audition into each of the three studios. I forget what I played on my initial audition, but I had to do the three separate auditions, and then I was in three different studios. Now, obviously, there's only 24 hours in a day, and everyone knows
Yeah.
this. Like, play 8 hours a day on each instrument. It's like, okay, that's not how math works necessarily. But that sort of, I was as within reason held to as much of the standards of the studio as possible. And then I had to do two recitals that one of which was a little bit more specific than the other one, I suppose. But yeah, it was great. It was awesome. I didn't see the light of day. I was also the woodwind TA, so I didn't leave the music.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It was great. I had so much fun. I learned. I mean, that was me like cutting my teeth, being like, okay, this is how you do this. I always grew up playing these instruments in tandem, and I had teachers. My very first teacher was a doubler himself, which was great because he would instill in my head no, you're holding a flute right now. Why are you voicing so high in the back? Or oh, you're holding a saxophone and your chin is too flat. To be able to point out the differences in the different instrument families. So I feel like I've always been wired to think that way. But then studying with individual teachers as I got older in high school and then to college and grad school was huge, because it's the way that I operate and therefore the way that I prefer to play and teach is to say, okay, when you're holding that instrument, that's what you play. And so what can you do to really get your act together in that instrument family? And of course, within the families, there's all the different cousins.
Auxiliary instruments of each instrument. I mean, what about the logistics of actually practicing though on all of those instruments for that major? And even today, I mean, how do you manage your time and give each equal attention?
It's really hard, and it gets harder. I mean, when you join the real world, time is precious and limited. In grad school, that was probably when I was most on my game about being devoting that much just constant energy and constant time to doing that work. And basically what I would do is say okay, every single day I'm going to hit one, plus or minus one member of each of these three instrument families, one of which is going to be the main focus. Okay, today is a clarinet day, so I'm really going to go whole hog on clarinet. And then I got to do, if all I have time for that day is okay, I'm going to play through whatever piece I'm trying to come up with. I forget exactly, but you get the idea. Big clarinet thing is this day, and then I'm going to hit scales on flute, and then I'm going to work on this transcription on whatever. That's even too much. Sometimes it's just not enough hours in the day. So to be a little bit flex, or sometimes it's I've got all day. Let me just really stretch out. But that was kind of my goal. Is can I get to something on everything every day? And was able to do that with varying degrees of success. Also, I had a job in grad school, so it was a little bit funny, in addition to woodwind TA stuff, but it was a little funny to do it. But that was I was okay, if we can do it. I also, I love, I basically came up with this sort of not a game, but I love to cook. So I'd be okay, I'm going to bake something. Okay, Pecoraro, you got an hour and 15 minutes until that thing comes out of the oven.
Get into practice now. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I would say I'm not taking it out until I do these things. So then it's either that's gonna burn or you're not gonna finish. Quick, get it done.
Wow. Yeah. That's one way to do it.
I'm gonna get a treat at the end.
Yeah, a little reward for yourself. And then when you graduated from school, you started touring a lot too, with lots of Broadway shows around the US. What is that experience like? I know a lot of musicians and colleagues that have also done that, and it's a different sort of experience, and it's not for everyone. So what were some highlights, or some things you'll never forget?
Oh, I had so much fun working on shows. I worked on my first show out of school was Guys and Dolls, and then I did Grinch and 42nd Street was the last one I did. I also subbed actually on the same touring company, Big League Productions is the company I worked for. I subbed on My Fair Lady when I was in college, which is how I got connected with them because something happened when I was up in Ithaca and they went to the road and the person who was scheduled to play Reed 2 just bailed at the last second. So somebody knew somebody who knew me, and I basically just went in and like subbed with the production for like a month. So that was like my like lead in into that. But the touring itself was so much fun. It's hard, you know. It's hard to live. I have a lot of shoes. It's hard to live out of a suitcase and like pack like this is like, you know, what I'm living with for this like run of the of however many shows are booked. But it's cool, and I loved getting to see like little like vignettes of the whole country. Sometimes we were lucky enough to be for like 2+ weeks in the same city, and you can really stretch out. But like everything, and I remember the first on Guys and Dolls within that calendar year, I did Guys and Dolls and Grinch in the same calendar year, and within that year, I made it to like it was like I think it was 46 states. I should check this, but like you know, most of the states, and we swam in, you know, both oceans and the Gulf, like within the same calendar, and just like to see everything. I also got a lot of work done where basically I just get fidgety and I like to do stuff, and I had a bunch of like, you know, I don't know, I feel like all of us do this. We're like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if I could just sit down and work on this whole thing? But like, when do you have time to do this? It's like, okay, I've got 16 hours of bus driving in the next 2 days. There you go. So I did a lot of transcription. I did a whole big theory project. I did a research project on Hindemith that I kind of wanted to do from grad school that I never really, from prepping for a recital, I did a bunch of Hindemith sonatas and did a bunch of studying in his series 1 and series 2, which is his theory work. Yeah. And writing pop arrangements, just like I was like, I'm sitting on a bus, I've got finale, I've got a keyboard, I can just like get some work done. And of course there's sleeping and movie watching that happens as well.
Yeah, I hope you relaxed a little bit too. And I mean, you were talking a little bit earlier about getting these gigs through connections and kind of who you know. Is that how you got the Radio City Rockettes gig? I mean, that's a pretty coveted gig here in New York City. Everybody really wants it, and it's known for being a great gig. It's grueling though too. It's a lot of shows, all in a very condensed period. So how did you get that job, and how was that experience for you?
It was wonderful. That's so much fun. That is, I believe, if not the only one of the select few, I can't think of any others off the top of my head, gig in the Broadway kind of world that's an audition. It's a blind audition, and in order to be selected to audition, you submit a resume. And I don't know how they choose this. I imagine they like to see Broadway credits. So in that case, I suppose there is an element of like the who you know as it's worked up to that point. But that's a blind audition, and yeah. So the last 2 seasons that it ran, I was in the orchestra. This last season, actually, the audition was 2 days after my wedding, which was hilarious.
Wow.
Literally came home and was like, that was fun, back to work.
Yeah.
But it's a blast. It is grueling. It's a lot. They do the theater does upwards of 6 shows a day. The show is 90 minutes long or something like that. And the chairs, for the most part, there's a handful of people who are sort of grandfathered in from the previous iteration of the orchestra. But most of the chairs are double cast, basically. So like if you and I were the chair, we were like, you know, chair mates, that we could sit there with our calendars and say like, oh, I've got a thing that day. Why don't you take the most that we could each do would be 4 shows in a day.
In a day? Got it.
Within the week, we divvy it up how we do it. But it can be a lot, especially once you get closer to Christmas. It just is like, go.
I mean, do you get sick of the Christmas like vibe and the music? I mean,
the vibe, I think it's so fun. I mean, especially when the orchestra comes up and you can just see the house. It's just like, it's Christmas. It's just like magical, you know, it's so sweet. It's, you know, just like I don't know, when you're doing things, any sort of gig, whether it's a show or anything where you're just doing the same thing kind of over and over again, I feel like I can just kind of check in and out of like, okay, here we go. We're just going to do, I think of it in like movements, basically. Like, okay, we've got these 5 numbers that kind of basically run into each other, and then there's a dialogue, so I can sit.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of Broadway shows, and that is a lot of the mentality is just back to back, doing the same thing, a lot of repetition. So how do you stay fresh with that music and really stay focused and not start to let your mind wander and think about other things?
That's hard, especially towards the end or when you're
Yeah.
tired.
Yeah.
I like to, well, in shows like Radio City, where as the temperature is changing, it's like keeping pitch across the orchestra is like near impossible. We can't hear each other sometimes. And then your horns, like, okay, the flute's been sitting cold for the last four numbers, like, or if it's a clarinet and it's cold and you're pushed all the way in, good luck. I hope you have a shorter, like, what are you going to do? But, and then also different iterations of people, because in Radio City in particular, though I try to take this mentality regardless of where I'm playing, but in Radio City, it's easiest to apply this, at least as far as I've seen, because it's just it's a rotating door of people. You're never playing with the same even section twice, let alone the same orchestra. And different people have different tuning tendencies, and by the end, it's sort of fun to be like, oh, that person's in. They just like nail the placement of this, or like, oh, I know that trumpet player is going to be a touch sharp on this note, so let me just, like, I can kind of, as you know the book really well and you know the players really well, it's like a game almost. I can kind of like check in and out of like what needs to, I mean, not that I'm going to, drive the bus there, but whatever I can do to, have some fun and engage. And then it sort of feels like chamber music, and which I think it should be. And a lot of people really try to bring that to theater stuff, is like, how can we make this how can we apply the great, wonderful things that we all know from our worlds of chamber music into what we're doing?
Sure. Yeah. And want to talk about something else that you're involved in too, which is the Women in Jazz Organization's Collegiate Mentorship Program. You're the director of that specific program. So can you talk a little bit more about it? What some rewarding moments are working with the mentors and the mentees, and what your goals are with it?
As of the end of this season, I'm actually just moving on from the program. It has been an absolute dream. Just as the world is reopening up, I'm sort of retoggling how I'm spending my time, but it's been unbelievably inspiring. I pitched the idea to my friend Roxy, who's the president. Basically over coffee a couple years ago, I was like, we should do a mentorship program. Can we do this? And it's just taken on a life of its own. And it's just been, it's unbelievable. The best thing, there's a million best things, but the one thing that I kind of keep going back to is like, even watching these students like interact with each other on Instagram, which kind of seems like nothing. I'm like, no, but that's everything. Like, they have each other, Not only do they have, it took me into my 30s to get a female mentor. I'm sure, it depends, I think, kind of the journeys we've taken as musicians, but certainly in more of like saxophone clarinet world is just, and where I ended up being, I didn't have access to women to look up to in the same way that I would have liked to, and I would like to provide. And it's like, okay, well, it takes a village to make these things happen. Let's build the village. Let's do this. Let's get these students inspired, like, which they are, but they need to be connected with each other, and they need to know that we are resources. All the time, I'm in constant contact with these girls. I'm like, come over, I'll feed you. Or like, I ran into one of the students at another friend's gig, and I was like, she's a trombone player, and I was like, oh, come with me. And I like introduced her to all the trombone players there that I knew. It's like, this is the work we have to do. It's easy, I think, in any circumstance where whatever it is, whatever the industry is, even like where you see something is lacking, like if you're, if there's a discrepancy in what maybe could or should be, it's so easy to just complain and be upset. And sometimes you need to do that. You need to have the energy to get the ball rolling. But at the end of the day, it's like, we need to do something. So what can we do, and how can we do it in such a way that's like fun and inspiring? And then we are stacking the deck with women who can play their butts off and are awesome, and then know each other and know us. And that to me is like the most important thing about, anything. This is in the jazz world, but anything else. Connection is everything.
And you're forming a community too. Right. And what doors do you hope that you've opened for a lot of young women in jazz?
That they see themselves represented. And that there's no question. It's not even like, oh, I'm the only woman. No, like, you can do this because I'm doing this. So of course, anyone can do this. You can do this too. And I think it's the mindset more than anything. For anyone, not just women, anybody who's working on something, if you're in the right headspace, you can fly,
So who was a big inspiration for you? Jazz tends to be a little bit of a boys' club. So who did you look up to when you were studying and when you were starting off with freelancing and making connections in the city?
That's a great question. A lot of people. a lot of my flute teacher, mentor, guru, Janet Axelrod is like, I feel like she's like my older sister, mom. She's been absolute dream. She's like, even just having spent time playing with her and hanging out with her and taking some lessons with her, she just is, I feel like, could have changed so much about my playing. When I first moved to the city, I started taking lessons with Lawrence Feldman, who
Right. Yeah.
I think of him as like grad school part two. He just like changed my whole thing around. He was like, you can't play, you can sort of play now. Here you go. Like, changed like all of my playing, and my sound concept, and it's just been an absolute. I'm just so grateful to so many people. I can keep like naming all the people. I don't know. Is that something you do me to keep like, are you asking specifically about specific people?
Yeah, or like any women in particular that, I mean, it doesn't even have to be that you've had a direct relationship with, but anyone that you kind of looked up to in the jazz industry specifically.
There's so many amazing women. I didn't have a particular experience where I was like, that's what I want to be doing, what that person is doing. Not for any reason other than that just isn't kind of the direction that I was going in. That's a good question though. I hadn't really thought of it like that before. And the fact that I'm answering this sort of like wishy-washy is why I'm like, yeah, like that's why we need this, so that the next
exactly. Yeah.
Gets asked that question, they're like, here's a list of people for you.
Right. Yeah, it's important work. And how about getting started in New York City in general and freelancing? What advice do you have for anybody else that kind of wants to delve into that lifestyle and that career? It's difficult. Some people say, it can take 5 years to even just start to see results. So what tips and tricks do you have?
I found a lot of success in just making myself feel like musically like I was constantly working towards something. I think if I've always wanted to work in theater because I just think it's a really cool industry, and I've been really lucky to have amazing colleagues and play on the gigs that I've played on that have been so fun. But I think that in addition to that, you have to be working towards progress in creativity on your instruments, where it's not like theater is the end goal. It's like, okay, let me rephrase that. It's not like to be working on making progress in various elements of your playing as it would pertain to making music in the classical realm and or making music in the jazz realm, and constantly engaging with new content and constantly engaging with creative progress. That's what is going to inform theater playing or really anything else. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I get what you're saying.
And then, when I was first getting started, I was really lucky to have some friends and colleagues who sort of took me under their wing and helped me out and introduced me to a lot of people. But so much of it is just like constantly making progress on your own. A lot of people will get together and play, like, hey, come over, we're gonna play flute trios. I actually started hosting stuff. I would be like, okay, and it was a rotating thing. Like, everyone come over, I'm gonna make a bunch of tacos, and we'll bring a flute, a saxophone, a clarinet, and then, or your mouthpieces, and you my horns, which of course this is pre-COVID days. I don't know what'll happen. I've got everything here, and then bring some quartets, and we brought like let's play through. I don't know, like all like real rap, and then at one point somebody brought like the Pink Panther saxophone quartet, like goofy stuff. But that's not the point. Just practice playing, practice tuning, and then get to know new people as well. And that's so much of it as well. It's just like being really good at what you do, but also like being part of the community. The community is everything.
Yeah, making those connections and networking.
Yeah.
You were talking about having projects, your own, trying to make your own advancements on your instrument by yourself. Is that kind of where you think that your ideas come from, is just always trying to improve? You have a lot of projects, a lot of initiatives, lots of things that you just start up on your own. Where does the inspiration for those come from?
So I'm thinking about when I first moved to the city, I guess it was maybe a year or two in, I started, I put together an experimental chamber music concert series called the Variousound Sessions. And I did that because creatively, having spent so much time in Boston, the third stream world and the avant-garde world that creatively really spoke to me. And that's when I felt like I was like, oh, this is like really, this is it. This is the music. This is it. So I wanted to have a play. So I started booking these shows and then quickly just became an administrator with that, because every time I'd put myself on a show, the whole time I was playing, I was like, oh, I wonder if the sound guy has everything he needs and how he does here. Like, I'm just not in the music because I'm thinking about like, oh, the next set is in 5 minutes or whatever. So that was really fun. But looking to like, what do I want to be doing? What are some things I think would be really cool? So that, and so that's one thing that's jumping into my mind. As far as where my inspiration comes, is just wanting to play and wanting to have a place to play with people and provide a space for, in that case, provide a space for that music to be showcased. Every month, it was a monthly, we had 2 residencies. We had one in Bushwick for 2.5 years, and then we had a residency at Pete's Candy Store in Williamsburg for like 1.5 years before everything shut down. And every month there was a different, I would just curate it differently so that it like the sets would like match each other, but it didn't necessarily, it was always a different sort of vibe, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, another project that you've started up, it was during the pandemic, which is this quarantined woodwind ensemble. Can you talk more about that and what we can expect to hear in your performance coming up?
Yes. So that started off as a, haha, wouldn't this be a funny idea thing with my friend Tyler, who I'm running the ensemble with, where we just wrote up a bunch of like silly pop tune arrangements for woodwind ensemble. We were like, you know what, everyone's home. Let's like just put something out, because everyone was online at that point too. It was like, and I had a couple things ready, like in the barrel, ready to go. I was like, let me just see if I can get some people to play this really quick. We just had everyone recorded on their phones. We were like, just use the audio from that. We've since stepped up our game because a lot of people have home recording stuff. So it's like, if you
especially now, yeah.
And so then we were like, now we're like, if you have a home setup, cool, you can go ahead and use it. If you don't stress out. We can just get the audio from your phone, from your video. Yeah, and it sort of took on a life of its own. But then we had a couple, and people were down to do it, and we basically make it as user friendly as possible. So it's like, if you do 2 takes, it takes you like 10 minutes, like, or whatever. Like, it doesn't have to be hard, doesn't have to be a big time investment. And then it's usually we write the arrangements to be like as easy, like you don't really need to like sit there and shed necessarily. Sometimes, whatever. Like that's the point. Is it should just be easy and fun. And then I've got video editing software. That was one of my quarantine skills, was learning how to use Final Cut Pro.
Good for you. Yeah.
I'm like, it's like fun. Now I have it. Now I'm going to keep learning how to do it. But one of our goals with that was like, at a certain point, we were like, let's keep it rotating so that we're not asking the same people to do, too much work. But then at a certain point, it was like, let's see how many people we can involve. We're nearing 150 people.
Wow.
And the list isn't, New York is amazing. The list isn't even exhausted.
It will never end. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, as we keep reaching further and further out, it's like, it's just, so it's been a fun way to have like a little community moment.
Were you worried at all during the pandemic about how things would be afterwards or when it would end? I mean, this really affected a lot of people in our industry and specifically on Broadway. So did you have any concerns? Are you a little anxious about the reopening?
I believe in us. I think we're going to be okay. We're going to be there. I mean, just like everyone else, it's interesting, and I'm curious to see what happens. I don't have a show of my own right now, so it's a little bit less clear for me what my specific timeline will look like. I'm supposed to work on a show that's opening at the end of the calendar year, so like, that, which is great. But like, so until it's a little bit of treading water. I'm not worried. I think we'll all be okay. I am interested to see how things, as things reopen, people I think are just going to be less likely to sub things out, or who knows what the producers are going to be doing, if they're going to be cutting down ensemble sizes, and then there's rules, So I because I have no idea, I'm just like la la la, like I'm here and I'm excited and I believe in us. I feel like we're going to be okay, but it's interesting. I teach privately, and I did before the pandemic, but I stepped that up. So that's been basically my main source of income this whole time. I have 23 private students right now.
And how has that been teaching over Zoom?
It's so hard. It's so hard. I am very lucky that I knew personally just about a couple of newbies, but like either it was kids I already had and like I gained their siblings, or like kids who I used to teach but moved away and are like now wanting to do, so and something about that made it easier. I think if nothing else like the thing that's lost on Zoom is the nuance. So like,
sure.
for example, things like this that like, but I'm like, okay, I know how that kid plays. It sounded like he voiced it flat, and I bet he did because that's how he plays. Try that again, and blah blah blah, whatever. Like I can kind of split the difference. But the hardest thing about that is just the collaborative element where the you can't play together. So what I'll do is like if I have some students who are like transcribing jazz tunes. It's like, okay, let me screen share the YouTube from my side of things, the YouTube, and I'll play along, and then you screen share with me your side of things, and it's just like more of a process. But so I could hear and they could hear it in real time. It's been tricky, but I don't know. More than the teaching, I worry about these kids. I so much of the time my homework assignments are like drink water, go outside, like stretch your body, and
Right.
like you live in my house.
Bring some balance. Yeah. Do you, speaking of doing other things besides practicing and sitting there in your practice room, you had a side hustle, do you still, of being a professional florist as well? That's, that's really cool. How did that get started? And is it kind of exhilarating to be creative in another way besides through music?
It's an excellent question, and the answer is yeah. Like it's so fun. That was a side hustle I picked up in grad school just because I lived in Boston, and I was like, I need a little extra something. And I had no experience. There was a help wanted sign in this florist up the block from my place, and I went in, and they were like, "Do you have any experience?" And I forget exactly what I said, but in my memory, it feels like I was like, "No, but I'm nice and I like flowers," and they were like, "You're hired."
Yeah, and that's interview advice for everyone.
Be honest, no,
just say you're nice. Yeah.
I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said no. I was like, I hope that's not a problem. But I said I was a musician, and the owner was like, oh, that's okay. I then later, having worked in many shops since then, realized that people, I don't know, which is first the chicken or the egg, but I've worked with almost exclusively artists who that's their other thing. I've worked with many other musicians, dancers. I've worked with 2 different glass blowers, which is cool. Yeah, right. Graphic designers, things like this, and it's because you and I could sit down with some Trader Joe's flowers, and you could in 20 minutes you'd be like, okay, I get it. At least like the principle, because it's art. It's all the same stuff.
Yep.
And you're right. Exhilarating is a great word to use because it's just all the same principles of what we're doing with music. I've taught a lot of like flower design classes or terrarium classes. By the way, if you have any plants and you have questions, just text me. Strangers will text me and be like, hey, Emily, I'm so-and-so's friend. Can you take a look at my plant? I'm like, yes.
The plant doctor. Great. Good to know.
But yeah, like I've taught some of those classes, and the takeaways I always give people at the end, I think of it in like four categories I'm arranging, which you could apply this to anything. Color, shape, texture, and line, which this is music, this is food,
right, yes, exactly.
dance, this is everything. So you could apply this however you want. And then I love teaching flower design classes because I don't give very specific, like, let me rephrase that. I don't say like, these are the rules. I'm like, here are some options for what you can do. And it's cool at the end of those classes to see with the same guidelines, 6 people will have 6 completely different arrangements.
Yeah.
And having worked in shops like that too, like, like 4 of us will make like the same arrangement. And then we could go down the line and say, okay, Emily made that one. So-and-so made this one, because you know each other's style.
Right. You have your own taste. Yeah. Just like with playing too, you can hear somebody's sound.
Right. Exactly.
Well, it's so cool to hear about the different sides of your personality and your life. And thank you so much for sitting down with me and sharing all of that. It was really great to get to know you.
Thank you. So lovely to meet you as well. And thank you for including me. I'm honored.
And we really look forward to your performance. So everyone stay tuned for that. And I can't wait to share it with everyone.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.